Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Hijabi Way. Hope everybody is doing good. Today's video is a part of a series titled Loving Without Losing Sight of Islam. This is going to be the episode 4th of this series. Uh, Let me also add here that if this is your first time on this channel, this video is going to make a lot more sense if you watch the previous videos from this series as well. And for those of you who are interested in the previous videos of this series, I am going to be sharing the link to the playlist in the description. And also, let me give you a little understanding of what this series is all about. In this series, we are going to understand why it is important to maintain mindfulness, or what I personally like to refer to as taqwa, in our relationships. How, through this lens of taqwa, we are able to love people without losing sight of Islam, as the title of the series suggests. Now, up until now, we have understood that there needs to be categorizing of relationships based on certain qualities or traits. To keep things as simple as possible, we have made 3 categories, but we are going to look at these categories as boxes. And we have also labeled these boxes. Box number 1 is what we are going to call the real deal. Box number 2 is the gray box, and the third is the dark box. Okay. Now, before going any further, this categorizing this categorizing process might sound too simplistic, but that's life. Okay, the thing is that we tend to complicate even simple things. Otherwise, things are not as complex as they seem. What happens is that we collect too much clutter from our lives through our experiences and how we relate to those experiences, what we refer to as baggage, right? Our emotional baggage. The thing is that the more clutter we have, or the more scattered things are, the more difficult it's going to be for us to be mindful, because we are getting distracted. Or when we are walking around, when we are pursuing things that we need to pursue, what is happening is that we keep stepping on things that cause us pain. But that thing shouldn't have been there in the first place, right? The same is with our relationships. So, how do we clear up the clutter, or how do we make sure that things are not scattered around? We put things in their right places. Okay, this is what we are going to do with our relationships as well. We are going to put that baggage down, and we are going to open it, and slowly and steadily we are going to take things out and put them in their rightful place. Now, when we start putting people in these boxes, it is to help us gain clarity and declutter ourselves from toxicity, because it's not always the other person who is toxic. We don't just need to be aware of the other person's toxicity, but we also need to know in which areas we tend to be toxic, and also how we entertain toxicity in our lives. So the boxes are meant for nurturing a positive outlook and are not meant to judge or hate other people. For today, the focus is going to be on the first box. In this first box, we will be putting people who are real with us. These are our true friends, or relationships that we can trust. This is our gang, our tribe, or and age doesn't even matter. When I say true friends, it doesn't necessarily mean our classmates or colleagues, because our true friends may not be same age as we are. They may not be working in the same field as we are. They may, but they also may not. So keeping that possibility open. Now, here is the thing about all of this. This process of categorizing people seems very simple, right? But because our society, our culture tends to make things so complicated, we might feel triggered when we start going about it. Why do I say that? When we start having these boxes and trying to see which person belongs in which box, it is going to be very challenging for our mind, because we are not just making categories. Rather, what we are doing here is completely changing and reprogramming our way of perceiving things. When we try to understand the seerah, what we observe is that Quran was reprogramming the believers. So turns out this process of reprogramming is actually a huge mission, because this is how we break uh, what we call generational curses. This is how we heal not just our entire lineage, but we set a far better and a healthier example for our next generations to come. Now, if you are in your teens or early 20s, you might find it less challenging than those who are older to be able to recondition this way of perception. The reason here is that when we are young, we have high chances of molding or changing ourselves or our mindsets. But as we grow into this society, it doesn't give us much room to be who we want to be. It imposes its toxicity on us because the older generation didn't take up this mission of reconditioning or reprogramming. And eventually, we might even forget who we are in the first place. So, what happens is the baggage keeps on accumulating, which means somebody has to consciously decide to take on this job to stop and put down that generational baggage and really take a good look at what is inside. And that's what Islam teaches us. Quran is a reminder, right? It reminds us of who we are. Where have we come from? Where are we supposed to be going? How amazing and incredible our potential is. Now, we are not here blaming our elders for not unpacking that baggage, okay? Because let's admit, the kind of world that we are living in, we have access to so much information that our elders didn't have access to. So that means the responsibility falls on our shoulders. We are far more responsible than they were. And that's why we are here discussing this topic. I'm sensing here that one video isn't going to cover this topic, especially if we do want to really understand the topic at hand. And that is the whole point of making these videos, right? What good is a shallow understanding of things going to do? So instead of moving too quickly, what we are going to do here is address the important points that are coming up here and move at a steady pace. We want to understand what we are talking about so that it can benefit us, and through us, it can benefit other people. The first thing that we understand when we think about making categories is that we are having a realization. The realization is that different individuals are at different frequencies. Had they been on the same frequency, we wouldn't need to categorize people, right? But that's just what makes things actually interesting, because if everyone was on guidance, just an example, if everyone was on guidance, what would be the point of the mission of the prophets, right? It's a genuine question. Similarly, if everyone was awake, what would be the point of awakening? None of us come to Islam overnight. We all go through an internal process, born Muslims as well as reverts. And Islam is not just something that we just like sugar that dissolves into our tea and we just drink it. No, rather it's a process. The way lotus or a rose opens up, it's a gradual process. When we awaken, how do we awaken? Usually we think of awakening as something that is completely connected to the soul and has nothing to do with the intellect or emotions. But that's not the proper way of looking at awakenings. This, of course, is my opinion, and maybe someone else has a different opinion about it, and that's completely okay. Diversity is beautiful. Anyway, as I was saying, awakening is a process. I'll give you a simple example. When we first realize how crucial it is to unpack our baggage, or when we get serious about Islam, something actually triggers us into this seriousness. So let's call it the first awakening. Now, we feel at this stage that we have woken up while others are still asleep. But here is what makes things interesting. What we have gone through is just a first step or first stage of awakening. That we realize the importance of reconditioning our outlook, or we realized how true Islam is. But it's only after we keep going through this journey or this process that we keep hitting important spiritual milestones. And with each milestone, we awaken even more. We realize that we are going to keep getting woken up time and time again. You know how beautifully we are told in the Quran? Allah says, Allah is the guardian of the believers and He brings them out of darkness into light. So what we realize here is that there are layers and layers of these curtains of darkness within us, within each of us. Each awakening lifts a curtain or a few curtains for us, depending upon who we are, where we are in our journey. And when that happens, we see more light than before. And the more light that we have, the more clearly we start seeing things. Now, what happens with this very first awakening stage is that we tend to start hitting the accelerator, when in reality, what we are supposed to be doing is hit the brakes. What do I mean by that? We get so enthusiastic when a curtain has been lifted and light is finally entering that in our enthusiasm, we want everybody to wake up and experience that light, which is not a bad thing at all. We are Muslims. We like for people what we like for ourselves, right? That's what our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us. But the reason we need to hit the brakes is to understand what has just happened within us. Instead of focusing on waking up people, we at this crucial moment need to step back and take stock of things within and around us. And when I say things, I mean our experiences, our feelings. The wall that has just crumbled down, we have to let the dust settle. But at this point, it is very easy to lose sight of the bigger picture and end up being harsh to people. Why didn't our elders do the inner work? We these questions start coming up. Or why didn't our elders take Islam as seriously as it should have been taken? These questions can leave a bitter taste if we are not careful. Perhaps it would be healthier to understand that every individual had a place to fill in, and because they did fill that place, we get to fill this place now. It's like a I might not have been holding this Oppo phone in my hand had there not been a time when Nokia 1100 was trending. Okay. So at this point, the important thing to remember is that the one who sees a little more clearly than the others around him or her, the one who goes through the process first, the one who has more knowledge, is the one who should be more compassionate, more forgiving, more understanding, because this person has been given a certain knowledge at this time that the people around this person didn't have or still don't have for now, because things can change. So that's the thing about knowledge, it's a responsibility. Someone who has less knowledge can laugh at the one who has more knowledge, but the one who has more knowledge doesn't have the right to laugh at the one who has less knowledge, because the one with less knowledge is excused. He doesn't know, she doesn't know, okay? They're completely unaware of that knowledge. But there is no excuse for the one with advanced knowledge, because we know we have been there too. We can see where we have come from. When we come to this realization that not everyone is on the same frequency as we are, this is where we must stop and take stock of things, or take it in slowly in order to understand what really is taking place here. This is where lots and lots of Muslims actually slip. So we have to be very careful. The reason we have to be careful is that at this point, we can either unpack the generational baggage or we can actually add to it. It all depends on how we respond to this newfound information that we have come across, how we respond in this first stage of awakening. So once we do take stock of things, what happens is we feel this spring of compassion just spurting out within us. We understand that peace can be cultivated within us instead of imposing peace, or imposing a peaceful state of being upon ourselves. We begin to understand that the more understanding we have, the more compassion we have, and the less energy leaks there are within us. Instead of absorbing any negative emotions coming from another person due to their lack of understanding or a lack of certain knowledge, what happens is instead it is our peace that seeps through into them organically, naturally. This happens by seeing ourselves in others. And if we can't see ourselves in others, then we can at least realize that we could have been left without this certain knowledge too, had Allah Azza wa Jal not protected us in a different kind of way or made us learn from our experiences differently. So when we develop this bridge between ourselves and others, it makes not just being in a state of peace easy, but it also leads to compassion organically. We don't have to bully ourselves into being compassionate. We become naturally compassionate. The reason I'm getting to this uh, uh, into this a little deeply here is because we often notice that religious people tend to be harsh, okay? And this usually is the result of speeding up at a crucial point of our journey instead of hitting those brakes. When we stop observing carefully what has happened around our first awakening, it opens up our heart space instead of closing it. We often see some very religiously enthusiastic people. I'm just giving you an example, okay? They get really irritated by a what looks like a quote unquote novice Muslim, let's just say, read a book that doesn't resonate with the way that they see Islam. So they start telling these novice Muslims not to read these books or they will get deviated. When we see this scenario from a, let's just say, a zoomed out perspective, we notice that this scenario is a direct result of not understanding that each individual has to go through the process of awakening. And my awakening or my journey or my first or second or 50th awakening is probably going to look very different from the person sitting next to me. We have to understand that my Lord is not just my Lord, He is each individual's Lord, okay? He takes people out of the darkness and brings them into light. Okay, we don't do that. He does it. He may use us as a medium or as a trigger for other people's awakenings, which is awesome and not so awesome at the same time, because when people do get triggered by us, they will either be drawn towards us or they will run away. They might even hate us, okay? And if we are not grounded enough in our knowledge of the Quran, if we are not aware of what's really happening in this scenario, we might end up taking other people's reactions personally. We might think we are facing rejection from people, when in reality, because they have been triggered by our energy, it has caused them to face their own awakening, their own shadows. Now, what they do with this newfound awareness is something that's up to them. But what we have to bear in mind is that their reaction, it has a lot to do with them and very little to do with us. So as I said before, the more we understand what is really going on beneath the surface, the more we are naturally inclined to keep our heart space open. So even if there are people who don't feel this need to awaken through us, we have to remember that there are also high chances that Allah Azza wa Jal will use someone else as a medium for that goal. The caller of the prayer, the one who calls to prayers, will call, okay? That's his job. That's his job. But those who are meant to wake up through his call, they will wake up. And those who don't wake up through his call, there are again high chances that they are meant to wake up through someone else's call. So the best we can do in this scenario is not to let shaitan block our heart space by making us react to the baggage instead of responding to its presence with mindfulness, with taqwa. Remember that he who caused our awakening is the one causing the awakening of others as well. We realize that he knows the journey that they need to make. We don't. All we can do is embody our own truth, our own awakening. And when we understand this, instead of breaking our own hearts, the incredible thing that happens is that it humbles us. And when we let experiences humble us, we don't have to fake our peace or our compassion or our forgiveness. Whether it be for people who have already passed on or the people who are around us, whether younger or older than us, we realize that we don't have to impose these qualities of compassion or forgiveness upon ourselves. These qualities just grow organically, naturally, because now we don't see an individual as just an individual or as an enemy. We see them the way we see ourselves. It's a whole journey, a whole process within a person. That person is not just a person. He is embodying too much within himself or herself. Except that we do understand that the older generation didn't have access to the information that now we have. So it only humbles us more, right? When we embody our awakening, when we live our authenticity, it will trigger people. But that neither makes us bitter against people nor does it intimidate us into hiding our authentic self. The way, we read in Surah Kahf, the way Khizr alayhi salam said to Musa alayhi salam that you will not be able to have patience with me. It is as simple as that. There is a beautiful balance that needs to be maintained. Khizr alayhi salam is authentic, but he also understands where Musa alayhi salam is coming from, that beautiful balance that he is maintaining. Because knowledge unfolds like a beautiful flower, something that happens gradually, beautifully. We retain our humanity, we retain our humaneness by not forcing people to bypass this vital process or inner journey. When we try to bypass this inner journey, that's when we disconnect from people. Even though we may be giving them sermons day in and day out, when we go through the process in a healthy way, we willingly give people the same grace, the same space to, as we often read on the internet, I think it goes something like unfold your own myth, right? So we let them unfold their own myth, their own mystery, okay? As the Quran teaches, by letting us know that we are only reminders, we are not guardians of other people. And now, because we know how lonely this journey can get. We have compassion for other people because we know it's not easy to go through this process. We know it is not easy to stand alone. I don't mean that now we will be completely zen and we won't feel any negative emotions at all. But what happens is that the deeper our understanding grows, that threshold gets higher, right? We don't react to the negativity as quickly as we used to. It doesn't mean that now we won't feel this heavy burden on our shoulders. Yes, we will. If we have really understood our mission, we are definitely going to feel burdened. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in the Quran. He says, had we sent down this Quran to a mountain, you would have seen it humbled, burst apart out of awe for Allah. So, because this reprogramming ourselves or breaking the generational trauma or toxicity means that now we have made up our minds to go against the tide, we fully understand how huge this task is, how difficult it is going to be. But we are also understanding how important it is for us to do this work. So, as to give healing as a gift to our generation instead of multiplying the toxicity for ourselves and others. That's the kind of legacy that we would like to leave, right? It's a beautiful legacy. So regardless of the reactions that we are going to face, we are still naturally going to try to maintain this balance. Think of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the pain that he went through right from his childhood or even before he was born. Let's just sit here with this knowledge, with this particular information from Sirah for a few minutes. If anyone goes through half the trauma of what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through, would they be as compassionate, as loving, as wise, as understanding, as pure as he was? Think about a trauma that you went through. How many scars has that one trauma left? Or someone you know who has been scarred for life because of one trauma that they went through. What is this here teaching us? How is there such a massive difference between the personality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and our personality? Now, let's get this clear. I'm not saying we can be exactly like him. What I'm saying is, why is there such a huge difference between him and us? The answer lies in the Quran itself. The more we observe the Quran, the more we observe the Seerah, the more apparent it becomes that there was a process that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through. There is this beautiful ayah that embodies this wisdom in such a profound way. Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know that you are saddened by what they say. And indeed, they do not call you untruthful, but it is the ayat of Allah that the wrongdoers reject. So when I say process, it includes us processing our emotions by analyzing what triggered those emotions. Processing not just the emotions that rose within us, but the triggers and the triggers behind those triggers. Because if we think about it carefully, when someone goes out of their way to offend us, there is something there that triggered that person into doing that. The whys and the whats and the hows, and not just on an intellectual level, but also emotionally processing things is what is needed. And yes, it is not easy, it is going to be difficult, it is going to be challenging, it's going to be triggering to face those shadows within ourselves, within our lineage, within our society. But how we healthily face these hurdles is by letting ourselves feel instead of disconnecting from ourselves. The way Allah Azza wa Jal addresses our emotions, just the ayah that I quoted, that we know that you are saddened. Just look at how beautiful it is. Allah Azza wa Jal is validating the emotions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is so beautiful. So what we are learning here is not to dismiss our emotions, but at the same time making sure that we are consciously getting out of this fight or flight mode. What I mean by this is that oftentimes when we face a difficult situation, when we face a difficult truth, we either react or we go into it rather aggressively, something that we realize later that it was totally uncalled for, or what we do is we just run. We totally refuse to engage in that situation. And it's only later in our healing journey that we realize that we could have handled the situation in a much balanced way. So, consciously stopping ourselves from not bypassing the process or the journey without disconnecting from our emotions is the key here. Because when we really allow ourselves our emotions, we are also more comfortable with allowing other people their emotions. When Musa alayhi salam was getting angry at Khidr alayhi salam, it didn't deter Khidr alayhi salam from doing what he was meant to be doing. He kept on doing his work. Musa alayhi salam kept on getting triggered. What we learn here is that sometimes two people may be walking side by side in the 3D, in this physical world, but at the same time they might be living in two very different timelines. But that doesn't mean one is below the other, okay? They were both massive characters, incredible people, but the timelines were different. But the one who had more knowledge said, how can you have patience about which your understanding is not complete? That is the beauty of it. That is the beauty of someone who has knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the more understanding you're going to be of other person's struggles to understand what is going on. But it is not going to stop you from doing what you're meant to do, right? You live in that knowledge. So, as simple as categorizing people might seem, this exercise actually opens the doors to a lot of inner work and looking within ourselves in order for us to place people in those categories, not with anger, not with hatred, but with compassion and a healthy way of perceiving things, letting ourselves and other people have that space and that time, because a process takes time, right? A process takes time, it is gradual. So to let them go through this without letting any negativity influence our behavior or the way we see or understand things. And the reason here I went in depth here is because when we talk about categorizing people, I am hoping that we will do it with compassion. We will understand where we are coming from and where they are coming from. So we will love people, but without losing sight of Islam. That's all for today. I hope this wasn't too much to take in. If you did find this helpful, if you did resonate with what I was saying, then please make sure you share it with the people you love. Sharing is caring. So until next time, Assalamu alaikum.